I told you to go right up to your room and change your filthy clothes. Honorin's bones jumped inside her skin. She looked up from her sooty hands to see Agnes standing at the top of the next flight of steps, wearing her fiercest scowl. There was someone in the house, Honorine said with a squeak, pointing to the open window, and then down the stairs at the singed paw prints. Agnes bustled over to the landing, pulled the window shut, and drew the curtains tightly closed. "You didn't see anything," Agnes said, as if it were both a question and a statement, "and you would not speak about this to anyone." "Did Lady Vidalia anyone?" Agnes repeated. She pointed up the branching staircase. "To your room now." With her brow furrowed in silent protest, Honorine turned and marched up the stairs, and stood still on her hands and the book in her apron pocket. The rest of the staff lived on the lower floors of the east wing of the house, in the rooms near the kitchens. Honorine stayed in a nook up in the attic on the west end of the building, in the oldest parts of the house, where rough ancient stones and enormous wooden timbers were still visible in the walls and ceilings of many of the rooms. There she had a quiet little space with a snug bed, a tiny fireplace, and a large dormer window that looked out over the gardens and the northern sky, all tucked up under the very oldest rafters, where the roofline was uneven and impossibly steep. Her window was of course adorned with yellow stones hung in a string across the roof, the very top of the glass. They were, to Honorine's disappointment, dark and exceptionally ordinary at the moment. She set her lantern down, untied her apron, and emptied her pockets onto the bed along with the small leather-bound book. Today she had gathered a pocket watch, a music box, and a carved wooden kaleidoscope, all broken to add to her collection of projects gathered on the stout wooden mantel over her fireplace. She often tinkered with them in the late hours of the night, sometimes fixing them, sometimes taking them apart and building something new. But tonight she took no interest in her malfunctioning treasures. Instead, she picked up the little leather-bound book, still dusted with drying soot. It was beautiful. The cover was tooled with the image of a crown made of stars, and mythical beasts shimmered on the inside pages. A great phoenix with a silver and gold feathers and reptilian eyes stared out from the heart of the raging fire. On the next page soared a copper-colored stallion with tremendous black speckled wings that reached to each end of the paper. "Pegasus," Honorine read from the text painted in tiny strips along the edge of the inked drawing. "The winged horse, visible in the autumn sky. Do not be fooled by his beauty, for he is bloodthirsty and vicious." She looked up. Vicious. He certainly looked hot-blooded, but far more vicious was the center on the next page, and a dragon covered in claws and spines a page later. The creatures were made all the more frightening by their curious iridescent ink that gave an illusion of movement as light hit the page. Other pages held detailed drawings of engine components and bizarre machines which she found fascinating if impossible to decipher. There were also hasty journal entries listing what must have been important dates and events on some kind of expedition. April the 18th, 1879, hit edge of hurricane in Azores. May the 4th, 1879, second engine test a complete success. One entry was signed B. Vidalia. Lord Vidalia wrote this. Honorine whispered. A little spark of electricity pricked her fingertips as she flicked through the pages. This wasn't just an almanac of his work, it was his actual journal, written in his own hands as he had traveled. A few other brief journal entries were scrawled among the illustration. In others, there was bad weather. In early September, a baby was born to Lord Vidalia's fellow explorer, Nautilus Oliphant, and his wife Anne. Then several pages seemed to have been torn out, leaving little ragged edges tucked among the binding. Several times she encountered the word "modern" printed among the drawings. The very last page was filled with an image of a slender man posed very elegantly and artificially, holding out a glowing golden pear as he were offering it to the reader. He had wild hair and vibrant blue eyes, and there was a great deal of text written beside him, but much of it was blotted out with spilled red ink, or perhaps she realized with a slither of distrust, blood, between the smears and splashes. She managed to read a few lines of text. Myth of the Stolen Fire, known mostly as the Mapmaker, viciously guards his identity. Known to kill, I have concluded that it is far too dangerous to continue pursuing these particular moderns, and accordingly, I have destroyed all of my research on the topic. B. Vidalia, January the 9th, 1880. 1880, Honorine read out loud. Aloud, she repeated the date to herself a few times before she hit on why it stood out. Lord Vidalia had vanished in early 1879, just after the portrait of the Vidalia family was painted and hung in the east parlor. He had not returned to the house again, yet somehow this book had found its way back into his study, and then wound up in the fireplace. Honorine closed the book and held it tightly in her hand, as if the creatures within might sneak out from between the pages. She wondered what to do with it. This was a book about dangerous things, and someone had tried to destroy it. She kept turning this puzzle over in her stall as she changed out of her swelled grey dress and into a pair of patch of overalls that Agnes found appalling. But it was well after dinner time now, when the rest of the house prepared for bed, and Honorine began her favorite part of the day, a few quiet hours of tinkering with her little gadgets and contraptions. If Honorine was strict, Agnes would never see her taking her sooty clothes down to the wash. Before she could reach the door, she was distracted by the sound of something tapping on her window. She looked up excitedly, expecting for a moment to see the stone slowing again, but instead she saw something small and shimmery hovering outside the glass near the window-sill. It looked like a large bee made of copper and brass, with a little stone eyes and crystalline wings. When she opened the window, it flew straight in and landed on the bib of her overalls. She had seen her be like this several weeks ago on the carpet in the east parlor. She had nearly swept it away thinking it was just a dead insect. Then she noticed the strange chattering and heard a soft ticking, like clockwork gears moving somewhere inside it, and realized that it was a tiny machine. It appeared to be broken, and she took it back to her room, intending to examine it more closely after completing her daily chores. But the first bee had vanished from her mantle by the time she returned. Perhaps this was the same one, and it had somehow fallen through a gap in the floorboards or flown unsteadily out through the chimney. This time it wasn't getting away. She wrapped the bee in a handkerchief and tucked it in her pocket along with Lord Vidalia's book. She was running out of time to get to the laundry, and Agnes would still expect her to be in presentable clothes in the next morning. The clock at the end of the hall began to chime 10 as Honorine picked her way down the servants' stairs to the lowest level of the house. The kitchen was busy with the end of the day tasks, some servants still cleaning up from dinner, some scrubbing the cooking areas, others preparing for the next morning, setting out bread dough to rise and bring in wood to stoke the ovens before the first light of dawn. Honorine gingerly carried her bundle of dirty clothes toward the washing machines in a separate alcove of the main kitchens. "Good evening," she said to one of the cooks, and was met with a glare. "And goodbye then," she muttered under her breath as she made her way into the laundry. There she was confronted at once by Jane, a scullery maid who had never been particularly fond of Honorine, for reasons that seemed very obvious to Jane that were a complete mystery to Honorine. "What are you doing down here?" Jane snapped. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the dirty clothes. "I'm almost done for the day, and you've gone and ruined your fancy little outfit?" Honorine felt a flicker of anger in her cheeks. It was either get my apron a little dirty or let the house burn down. I can wash them myself if it's too much trouble. "Ha," Jane said, and have you ruined your uniform? Who would get blamed for that?" Honorine leaned around the angry maid to look at the washing machines. They resembled half barrels on legs, with a gear and crank on one side to stir the water in the tub, and a second crank that ran the sets of rollers used to wring out the wet clothes after they were washed. Beside Jane's tub was a second tub, but another laundry maid, Maddie, laboriously turned the crank to keep the hot water agitating, huffing and sweating, and turning a brilliant patchy red as she worked. "You know, it would be possible to fix a motor to that," Honorine said, pointing to the crank handle, "to turn the agitator, so you don't have to do it all by hand." She could see not only how it worked, but exactly how to build it. One little motor with a belt turning the crank and pedal, another keeping the wringer moving. "Oh," Jane said, "so the machine would wash all the clothes for me?" "For me?" "Yes," Honorine said. "It should be much less work that way. And then what would I do all day if a machine could do my work for me?" "You mean to put me out of a job?" "Oh no, not at all," Honorine said, You misunderstood. I heard you perfectly, Jane said. She was no longer annoyed, she was angry. We're already running on a skeleton crew down here, and there's nowhere to go if we lose our positions. You'll have us all out in the streets or the workhouse. Corinne fumed and felt the blush in her cheeks, blazing to a full rage, but she choked it down. Fine, she said. It was a terrible idea. For that I ever spoke. She spun on her black-booted heel, walking as calmly and confidently as she could until she was out of the room. Then she ran up the steps, through the servants' dining room, and into the empty hall, getting her anger out through a good foot stomping on the solid wooden floors. She marched all the way back up to her room, her mind filled with Jane's startling face, and Agnes dismissing her as she deserved no explanation about the stones, or the paw prints, or the noises. Something suspicious was going on, but Honorine was angry, and only one thing ever really helped to clear her mind when she was upset. So she closed the door to her room and got to work on a prototype washing machine motor. Once the idea ignited in her mind, it grew like fire, filling up all the space for practical things or responsibilities. Even if Jane didn't want it, now she had to try to build that motor. She dismantled a few other half-finished projects to construct her new invention, letting the worries and grievance fade away as she focused on choosing suitable parts and fitting them together until she had a roughly assembled motor in her hands. By the time she had finished, it was so late that night had slipped into very early morning. With everyone else asleep, Honorine put her brand new motor into a pillowcase and carried it and her lantern down to the kitchen. The soft sulphur yellow light of her lantern shone on the wet stone floor and the scrub pots hanging from the ceiling near the stoves. Thick shadows swung across the brick walls. The sacks of grain, the bins of salt and sugar and cornstarch lined up in the open pantry. Honorine threaded her way past all of it to the alcove in the corner and put her washing machine motor on the pillowcase. It was attached in no time, and with a few twists of the gears, the belt began to turn and the motor began to run. Honorine climbed up onto the sorting table, pulling her knees to her chest, and watched with delight as the alligators spun in the water, turning the soap into delicate, glistening foam. Jane couldn't possibly be mad after she had a chance to use this splendid new machine. Honorine rested her chin on her knees, enjoying her quiet moment of victory. Her eyes wandered over the rest of the dark kitchen, searching for the next project. She looked at the ovens and wondered if she couldn't build some type of more effective thermometer or a machine to knead the bread. For surely once the rest of the staff saw that she could make everyone's work easier, they would not all look at her with such suspicion whenever she entered the kitchen. It was times like these that she missed Francis. He would have been excited to see the washing machine turning on its own power, and her lantern flickering away on the table. Francis had been her closest companion when they were only children in the house. They had spent a good part of each day together, eating their meals or spending afternoons in the garden, and later taking lessons from Francis governess. As they grew, they had both developed a fascination with inventing and building machines. But then last year Francis had been sent away to school for the first time. Lady Vidalia had decided it was time for him to begin meeting and socializing with other children of his same age, same station. After the first semester, he had come home for holiday break with tales of classes and dormitories and dozens of other boys studying mathematics, history, biology, science. Honorine longed to visit such a place, but though Lady Vidalia might have been willing to pay a governess a little extra to give some lessons to the young maid, she wasn't going to pay to send Honorine to a proper school. So Frances went back to school and Honorine went back to work, spending her time that used to be for lessons with Francis building clockwork games they could play together when he returned for the summer holiday. She had made one with ducks that moved on a glass pond with magnets, and another with little wind-up elephants that flipped marbles through the air with springs in their trunks. But when the school year ended, instead of Francis, a letter arrived, excitedly describing his intention to stay over the summer and continue his studies. And at the end of the summer, another letter came stating that he was looking forward to a new year of classes. Honorine often wondered what he was doing at school while he was dusting bookshelves or watering potted ferns, or sitting in the kitchen in the dark hours of the morning observing her prototype washing machine motor, which was making a surprising amount of bubbles, too many to be contained in the tub. She realized and climbed down from the table to switch it off before they spilled out onto the floor. But before she could reach the machine, she was distracted by a faint flashing light at the far end of the kitchen. Not another lantern, not not a shaft of moonlight, but a spattering of green among the jars of extracts and pot of herbs gathered along the window sills. The almond stones again. Honorine spun around in every window the almond stone glowed, flickering and warning like the cold twinkle of tiny stars. She quickly switched off her lantern and the washing machine motor and snuck up the flagstone steps into the dark central hallway above the kitchens. Far down that at the other end something was moving in the foyer, much more lightly than before, tapping carefully across the marble floor. Honorine rushed down the hallway as quickly as she dared to the edge of the archway leading to the foyer and east parlor. Yellow lantern light spilled out of the parlor along with the sound of muffled, unfamiliar voices. Whatever was making the almond stone glow was in the house at the very moment, and this was a chance to see what it was.